Hello everybody, Centre Bounce. I am Swizz, normally for Supercoach Insider and Fancast AFL, but also here for the boys on Centre Bounce with Joe currently overseas, and Jeremy will be joining us soon. So here I am hosting the show. So this is very different for me, but thank you for having me, and I'm sure Jez will be on very soon. Massive week for everyone in Supercoach. Naturally, it's the last week for overall, but grand finals, if you've been lucky enough to make it. I think I'm in 6 or 7 of my leagues. Got a little bit unfortunate. I lost to my good mate Grimo last week, just even though he spent all day at Richmond, North Melbourne, saying I'm no chance of beating him. He got me by a few points, so that was disappointing to lose one of my cash leagues there. And good mate and good family in the play of cricket, but Riley, who got me in our cricket club draft, and I've talked about draft a league that I've talked about before. We've got 4 divisions in that, so being the chance of winning top division would have been nice, but going English over Bont as captain last week did hurt me and ended up losing that one. So good luck to him. I think he's playing his uncle in his league. So well done, and well done to everybody who is in their grand finals. Not just for head-to-head classic, but in draft as well. There's been some fantastic leagues. Just having a look through and some different group chats and people talking about not only their different draft strategies, but also that they different formats they have. Some people play a really deep draft, some a bit more shallow, but so it's kind of interesting to see how they formulate. And so the results of them after a big long season, it all comes down to today. Well, it comes down to this weekend. So good luck. Been looking over a couple of the latest installments for Supercoach, one of them in particular that opened today, which was NBL Supercoach. So I'm not really a big basketball person, but at the same time, be kind of try to get my head around that, a bit of research. But then next week on the bye week of the footy, we've got the AFLW starting off. So it's not a Supercoach, it's fantasy, but AFL has got involved in that. So that'll be interesting, especially because we've got the bye week in the footy before the finals. It's for the men's game. It'd be it's good that the women's game has sort of jumped on. It would be awesome if the Supercoach team got involved in that. And talking to Al and the boys last week, so we were down at Crown. Thank you to everybody who turned up for that as well. It's awesome seeing so many Supercoach content creators. The Centre Bounce boys were down there. Supercoach DR, Dr. Supercoach, you name it. So there's too many to shout out, but thank you for them and the Herald Sun boys for getting me on that. And so we had a bit of a chat privately with the Herald Sun guys and talking about some different potential changes that actually I'll get into that in a second, but let's just say hi to a couple of people. Hi, Shannon. Hey, Jen, become a big supporter of the show. Corey, great catching up with you. You were down there at Crown, mate, so it's good seeing you. Having a bit of a chat there, so well done. You made your grand final in Classic, well done then. Jen saying she's a big fan of basketball and you play as well. I guess what level do you play, Jen? And do you have a particular position? Tell us about it. To that, I'm never been a basketballer. I'm not going to say it's soft because it is still a physical game. It's just for more, I guess, for footy, I prefer a bit more of the physical content attack than that. But in saying that, I haven't played a huge amount of footy. I've played cricket, which has probably got the least amount of contact at all. Though some of our indoor games used to get a bit physical. But it'll be interesting still. It's great that the Supercoach opened that. So, they're having a look potential for AFLW next year. Naturally, they already have the Big Bash. The racing went away. I think there was more to do with gambling. And then we talked about some different ideas regarding the trades and buy structure and everything like that. So very dependent on what AFL does with their buy round next year. It looks very much like they will go maybe just a 1 week buy, which would allow for the draft and the trade period to happen. So there is some talks about a mid-season trade period. We've already got the mid-season draft where you can take players from the lower competitions. There's different rules about that, but your VFL, Waffle, Sandford. Usually if a player has played in the previous year or that, but there is different rules around that. So it'll be interesting to see if that's what they do. I actually think if you're going to do it, you should have it. My perfect scenario would be they do the Sir Doug Nicholls round, so the Indigenous round, and then you've got the ability to play more games in different locations. So, a couple of games in the Northern Territory, up in Cairns, WA, in different spots. The perfect world, and there'd be a lot to do. And I've said this, like I don't care what sort of side of the vote, the upcoming vote that you're on for the referendum, but I'd like to see this is one way you could support more Indigenous people. And if you could do something out in one of the communities during Indigenous round, that would be just absolutely massive for them. So especially, and you could just move it around from different communities. So yeah, I'd love to see something like that. You have your bye weekend the following week, so that round concludes on the Monday or the Sunday evening or whatever, and then they've got 2 weeks. So you do the next weekend. They might have the draft on the Friday night and have the trade period for sort of 3 or 4 for 3 or 4 days. So that obviously will give us a lot more content to talk about. Then, for a Supercoach point of view, because you've only got that, you've got that 1 week of buys, we don't need to worry about that whole buy period anymore where, we've got 6, 2, 4, 6, having the buy each week. So what the possibility we could have then, instead of having sort of 3 or 4 trades and the boosts and everything like that, for those of us that play Fantasy Premier League, we could potentially we have the wild card option. So twice throughout the season, and then we can use this anytime at the moment. You can completely reset your team depending on how much value your team's got up to. So the one look at is it comes up that trade period, that buy period, and everybody gets access to one wild card, and you could potentially reset your entire team, and then you start again for the run home. So that might mean, like Supercoach, you only get 20 trades, 24 trades. They might keep it at 35, 36, whatever. But yeah, just the ability to do that. And as a content creator, and I know a lot of you guys out there, one of the best things about Supercoach is leading into round 1 when you're picking your team. How many times do you swap your team? So could you imagine that round finishes? Let's call it round 11. Indigenous round finishes. Supercoach locks up on the Monday. The next game's not till Thursday week, and you've got a whole 10 days to play around with your team. And now different people's team values will be very different. So you might have got your team value up to 13 million. Some might be like 12 million, but that would definitely change the strategy of how we prepare. So it's definitely something that's been talked about. And we know it's been very successful in the English Premier League fantasy. So, yeah, I don't mind that one. I know a couple of people, because I threw this out to my followers on Supercoach Insider the other day. What options would you like to see? I know some people are like, I'd like to bring the trades back. Some people have said I'd like to see it as like AFL Fantasy and have your 2 or 3 trades each week. Like the Big Bash, they do 9 rounds and have 3 or 10 rounds. Actually, it might have been 14 rounds last week, and they had 3 trades each, but they don't roll over. But no matter what they do, each strategy or each way of it becomes a different strategy for people. The best teams are always going to find a way to get up to the top. I think that from a Supercoach perspective, they want as many people logging in as possible. They brought the boost to kind of help with these injuries and potential COVIDs. But the problem is so many people found a way to fast track getting their team ready. Then you get the situation still with 6-7 weeks ago, people have all burnt their trades. So Supercoach is looking at ways that they can keep people interactive longer, means you don't get these dud games in your head-to-head leagues. But it also, for them, they want people logging onto the Supercoach page throughout as long as possible. So definitely some different thoughts there. I brought up the idea of Supercoach Gold because a lot of the, obviously top players pay the 20 or 25 bucks or whatever it is each year. The potential to have like a second team. Could you have one for the home and away or and your overall? Could there be a separate competition for everybody in Supercoach Gold? So yeah, do you run a second team through that? So yeah, we're kind of exploring some different options there. So I'll just go back here. What do we got here? Jen, play for a local club. I'm a shooting guard and a small forward. Cool. Corey, I won a draft final last week with me winning with 4 players. Was that winning 4 players on field? I had Sicily, Jackson, Bont, and Marshall to McRae, Gordon, Briggs, and Sinclair. Jan's like, I've got to go to basketball training session at 6 p.m. Well, good luck. Enjoy that. Tomorrow night will be a good game. Tomorrow night, the whole round's interesting. So, let's have a look through that. And because until we get these teams ins and outs, we won't know exactly for sure how this is going to balance out. But Essendon, Collingwood could potentially be bringing a couple of players back. Maybe it's just for match fitness because they don't realistically have to win. But even if they were to lose and Brisbane win, they finish second. Port aren't going to beat Richmond by what's it going to be like 200 and something points to take over second. So the Pies, does it really matter if you finish first or second? Not really. Yeah, maybe it's just that whole finish top. But does that just put a little bit more pressure on you? And in the end of the day, the only thing they don't want to risk is Port Adelaide. Collingwood pretty well much want to play Port in that first final. Collingwood Port prelim. The only worry, not prelim, qualifying final. The only worry is then prelim does what happens if Melbourne gets through to there and it's a Collingwood Melbourne prelim. So is it better for Collingwood to maybe then play Melbourne first up? The issue is like Darcy Moore should be back, but Dacos they're talking about getting back for second week or even third week of finals. Collingwood's best, their best sides, will match anybody. But while they've got a few injuries, the best case scenario for them would be maybe a Port Adelaide first week of finals, and then you get another week off to rest up. And by prelim week, Collingwood would probably have their full side in. So they would probably back themselves to beat Melbourne if that's how it worked out. And that's just gathering if Brisbane was to beat Melbourne first week. So, yeah, but in saying that, Collingwood could very much beat Essendon even with players out. Like Essendon were dreadful, but will they try to bounce back with some, a bit of pride? And we don't know the ins and outs yet for Essendon. Hawthorn Freo. The Hawks are in a great form at the moment. Freo aren't playing for much, so you could definitely see Hawthorn finishing off with a win there. But so that's interesting game. North Melbourne Gold Coast, the complete tanking game. So Suns have a new coach. Well done to Dimmer as a Richmond supporter. I have no issue with it at all. Yes, I'm wearing looks like a Carlton top, but it's not. It's my cricket top. So, yeah, 6 years there. Be interesting to see how what he does to the list. He's saying it's sort of 80% there. So I think the Suns come out. They've got obviously a point to prove this week to the new coach. So even though that they're resting some players, like North's just got no incentive to win this. But it's funny because the players, in a way, if you're a fringe player, you've always got incentive to win. But the guys who know they're locked into that team next season and their best 22, they would much prefer Harley Reid coming in and playing alongside them next year. So they get it. But when you go on that field, you don't kind of switch off. It's more how does the coach sort of manage the team so LDU's not already playing. I think there'll be a couple guys like that who will miss. Still, at the same time, anything can happen in those sort of games of footy. Brisbane Saints will be interesting to see how the Saints respond. Nobody's expecting the win. Brisbane's record at the Gabba is amazing. I'd expect them to win that one. Geelong Bulldogs, this is huge. Bulldogs need to win. They were embarrassed last week, and you would expect on the rebound they'll come out and give it their all. Geelong has put that many players in the surgery. It's not funny. And they've got every right to do that. They won the flag last year. They have short pre-seasons every year. So they're like, let's get it over and done with now. Get our players in for surgery in August. So they're ready to go by the time we hit day one of pre-season. The thing is, the Dogs never win down in Geelong. I can't remember the last time they actually did, but yeah, there's something ridiculous. So they're going to have to beat that hoodoo, but you'd expect the Dogs to come out and absolutely pump Geelong this week. And if they don't, well, Bevo may as well pack up his stuff. West Coast Adelaide, Eagles, fantastic. It's always that one thing. You have that real high, you have that low. To the Crows, how did the Crows respond after last week? Yeah, that'd be fascinating as well. They text, he's the unfortunate one because obviously Curnow knows how many Tex will be in front of him, and he's sort of he's 8 behind at the moment. Tex could easily kick 10 in this game. He's kicked 10 before against them, and that was earlier this year. So you could see the Crows with literally nothing to play for now, just feeding Tex all day. Tex kicks a bag. He could potentially get as many as 12 if everything went right and if he was kicking straight. But Curnow knows on the Sunday evening that he'll know how much he'll have to get to win the Coleman. and the Blues might not be playing for anything anyway. Port Adelaide Richmond could be one of the biggest floggings of all time. I've got no hope for my boys. Reminds me of 2016 all over again when the Swans beat us by 20 goals. There'll be a few debutants for us, debutants. We lost that game by 20 goals. Chol played, and it's just the writing's on the wall here. Port will be trying to do everything to get themselves up and about and right, and they've got to win just to make sure they stay above Melbourne. And they'll be trying to back themselves to somehow close 12%. If Collingwood were to, for whatever reason, fall over by a certain margin, that could definitely cause some issues. Then Sydney Melbourne, another massive game. Swans, trying to get that home final, and they'll know if they can do that with the Saints there. Result the night before, and the D's, still fighting for that top 2 position. They're only 4 points behind, and they won't know the result of the Port Adelaide Richmond game. And then Carlton Giants, where the Giants could be playing for that final spot. If the Dogs lose, it means nothing. So there's a lot going on with that. Freddie, what are your thoughts on having access to all your trades in round 1?
Yeah, that's a bad idea, Fred. Hey, Swizz, kind of manning
no problem, mate. I'm just here talking my normal crap.
So that's all. You know how it is sometimes.
Yeah, it's all good, mate. I was sitting there and I realised, I was like, oh, hang on, I'm on here by myself. That's all good. We'll make this work. I've done this before.
Yeah, 100%. Well.
Oh, I'll keep going for a moment on that, but it's while you keep seeing yourself. Hey, Jono, how are you? So interesting round of footy. Yeah, and saying Freddie, like I don't. Some people have thrown this at me before, going, if whatever the amount, let's just call it 30 trades. Why can't I just have access to that the entire time? If I want to burn my team in 1 week or 2 weeks, the whole thing is Supercoach. They want people logging in as much as possible because they sit there and go to their for their advertising and everything like that. So it's not beneficial for them to allow that. I don't. If it wasn't for the home and away, the way it affects home and away matches. But again, as I brought up earlier, I was talking about the EPL, and we've talked about the wildcard option in Supercoach. I was talking it through before. And the other option that they do have is, for example, you get the 1 trade a week in fantasy, and you can hold that over the next week and get 2. But then you can actually minus your overall points to get more trades. So that is something. I know they've talked about that. They don't like it as much. The other one is then the team value kind of idea, where you've got, for example, you might be able to buy a trade for $500,000. And then the second time you do it, it might be $1 million or whatever. Or I'm just throwing up whatever salary cap thing. So hypothetically, I could say if with Dacos, for example, trade him out and then there might be a value deducted off that for me to bring in a player to cover him. So
I think that's so. I think if you start doing that, then Supercoach really becomes at risk of being too confusing. I think there's a very happy medium where, yes, you understand scoring and things like that, but anyone can just start and pick it up. And we've seen a lot of rookie players do very well, right, over kind of the years that we've played and the time that we've played. I think once you start changing it to the point where you have to micromanage stuff like crazy and include a lot of secret things and include a lot of things like that, it takes away a lot of the game, and I think it's going to make the game too confusing for new players just to pick up, and I hate that for that to happen, because the captain loophole is already confusing enough for a lot of people.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the balance, and that's why I brought up with them about the whole Supercoach goal subscription, because you've got the real hardcore fans that do that. So because there's naturally gambling and everything, and there's they've got to go through different terms and conditions with how Supercoach is, because there's the prize money, everything's involved that. So there's potential there that you have one competition for everyone there, which is a free competition, the 50K prize money.
Yeah.
But then with the Supercoach Gold subscribers, there's potential that they get entered into a different league, get a second team there, which is played by, and then maybe separate prize for that. So, I threw up going, okay, if everyone's paid $25 as Supercoach Gold. Maybe $5, $10, whatever of that goes into a different prize pool. And then you could have different prizes. So it doesn't just have to be so weighted the first prize. And then you could potentially have these different sort of rules because you've probably got more hardcore fans who have signed up to that. So maybe it is just the original classic Supercoach. Maybe they follow AFL Fantasy's lead and just have the 2 trades a week and make it simple for that, because then you get more casual viewers and listeners playing that. And then for the real hardcore Supercoach Gold, and I don't know how many exactly signed up, 10,000 or something like that, you might get even a few more. They get the second team, where then we have like the wild card during the one bye week, if that's how the AFL goes. And then maybe we get a bit creative with maybe only having 20 trades and different stuff there, where more strategies come into it.
Yeah, I guess you could do like a different game plan or something, make something available, but don't change the regular game. I think the biggest thing for me would be, hey, I think I obviously play gold now, and I quite like the optimize button and knowing break evens and all that kind of stuff, but having it so you can have a second team and it be legal. I mean, for content creators, that'd be fantastic. I'd love next year to run a centre bounce channel, like a centre bounce channel team, and then have my normal team without having to worry about, oh, well, if I earn some decent money, they're going to take it away from me.
Mm. And that's always my way. Like this year, I've had the 2 accounts, but the second account has just been for draft. And I checked with them and I found that was all right. But I hate to do it because I hate logging in to my second account just to press on the draft. And then I've got to watch myself not pressing on the classic. And then I've got to log in and log out. And I just, so next year, I'm probably going to do 5 drafts. I have asked them. And the hard thing is because that second account isn't linked to my Supercoach Gold. So I get a bit frustrated. So in a perfect world, I would prefer to have the option access to more leagues and more draft, like even like, because especially the draft leagues, the home and the away leagues don't worry me as much, but I absolutely love Supercoach Draft. And there's different, because of the extra rules we can have on it. There's some where I play keeper and it goes for 22 weeks. There's some that I play for 10 weeks, and it depends on like the sort of group that you have going in. So I'd like more options around that. They're all different interesting thoughts, and because there's different types of Supercoach, and not just that, but fantasy games out there, you get to play them and see what the good and the bad are of them. And as you said, that's the worry for those content creators who, because I've been in that position before. I finished, over for a week once. I just missed first place. I think I was 5th, and I missed by a few points. And that would have been a worry if I had a second team or was doing something because of the insiders that year. You could risk your cash because, technically you're cheating for it. Jono, that's a great question. So I do actually have a list because naturally I'm in a few group chats and we get talking about this. So maybe just say yours, Jez. I'm just going to try and find all my updated list that I have here.
I think for me next year, I'm going to, unless someone amazing comes around, I'm going to go guns and rookies. I think me and you have spoken off air, and I've spoken to some other people as well. The difference between mid prices and the really good first and second round rookies isn't really there. And I don't know if I can justify paying an extra 200 to whatever K versus what I get the value out of those. Really showed me that getting those quality 600K players are just fantastic. So it's going to be guns and rookies for me next year. There's a bunch of players who punished me this year for not owning them, and I just can't go through that again. So It was Tom Stewart and stuff heading into 2023, and next year it's your Sicily, Petrarca, and a few other players. These guys that are just pumping out consistent numbers every week that I just can't, you just can't afford not to have. Next year, I think the forward line is going to be really light in terms of premiums. So I might even do kind of similar to what we did in 2022 and stack that back line as much as I can, stack that midfield as much as I can, and then just go through the forward line with real cheapy guys.
Yeah. Okay. So I've got, and we've put this in a bit of a group chat. So we've got different policies. So I might even run a few that a few other people have mentioned. But so my number one lock is Dacos. You have defensive status still. It's he'll probably be a defensive forward. So it's you just can't stop with him. Supercoach Pro. Number 2, it's hey mate. is Sheasel, North Boy,
Yep.
especially with Hall and Zeeble retiring. He'll have defensive status too. So
and he'll be taking outs, baby.
Yeah. So he'll be an absolute lock. He's the Dacos situation. I can see it doing this exact same thing as last year, where people are like oohing of Dacos, which was me, but I got Dacos in real quick, where people will be on the fence about Sheasel because he'll be at some weird, awkward price. He'll probably have one bad preseason game, and everyone's like, oh, maybe not. And this kid will be like averaging 105 and be like, damn, why didn't I get him?
That way.
My third guy's actually dropped to fifth on my list just because what's happened the last couple of days. But my new third's Jai Newcomb. I think 50 games, he's ready to explode. And I was so disappointed he went out and got that 170 the other day. The only good thing, it does show that he's got a ceiling, but now more people might jump on, where I thought he was the Sarong Brayshaw for next year. So it's one I've been tracking. I have him, some shares of him.
How expensive do you think that's going to be?
I feel like it could be around that 540, 550 mark.
See, for me, that's too much. For me, that's way too much. Like, I'm looking at, hey, if you're a proven premium who's done well, then I'll take you. Like a Libba or a Cripps or even like a Tom Green, because, you're kind of getting that 120 average. If I try and take on Newcomb at that, I think that's too risky when I know there's going to be a lot of 600 plus K guys that I'm wanting in my team. Like, I don't want to be chasing down, not a Brayshaw, but like a Zach Merritt or a Petrarca or a Bont, for instance. I think the value getting one of those in a rookie versus like Jai Newcomb and another player, it's just not worth it.
Yeah, I personally just think he explodes next year, and that he's that's just my feeling on it. So, happy to be wrong on that one, but that's where I'm going. My number 4 is Tom Green. Yeah, I think this kid just continues to get better and better, and we probably didn't get to see exactly the best of him for different reasons this year, but he's still extremely solid. But the moment he's got back from that, those 3 weeks off that he's missed, he hasn't missed a beat again.
He's just consistent, which is the thing. He's going to be consistent, and he's going to be around. The only problem I have with Tom Green is I love the kid. I think he's fantastic. If he was at North Melbourne, I'd be very excited. The only problem is I have, and it's something that I kind of see with Supercoach players, is there's an issue for me if their price doesn't change much outside of what they kind of started with their price. That kind of makes sense. So a Brayshaw, for example, get him in cheap when he starts. You know that he's going to be around that 600K mark. If Tom Green only stays around that 550, 560, is he really that undervalued, or are you only paying, 100K for a 100 average type player?
And,
you know what I mean?
That is the thing, because some of these players don't have, like Tom Green. I'm not worried about him just going 3 big weeks of like 150, and he's going to price you out. But as a guy who consistently will just go 110, 115, and plays majority of games, he's pretty reliable on that part of thing. Again, like Newcomb, he's had a little bit more in the system, but they've hit that age bracket where I'm not looking at your Crippses anymore, your Neils, your guys who are hitting, the closer to 30 years old. I'm more looking at these 22, 23-year-olds who, have got that 50 to 80 games under their belt, and it's just that new wave. And that's where my original number 3 was LDU, because I think he could, but the late outs, and I think he's had 3 late outs this year, does have some concerns. So he might be my number 1 if he gets through preseason and he doesn't have a hiccup. But at the moment, I am a little wary. So he's
how much are you expecting LDU to be, like price wise? How much are you expecting him to be?
Actually, I'll have to look that. Are
we saying like 600K or like 530? Because at 600K, I'm not picking LDU. At 530,
I had a rough idea.
Sub 500 potentially, but I truly believe that we'll get.
He's not going to be that cheap.
I think we'll get some better options.
I think he's the main midfielder at North, and so he averaged 113 this year, so he's going to be 600, mate.
Yeah. Would you pick LDU to start, or would you pick Zach Butters?
The big
Connor Brady.
big chance I pick LDU because their fixture will be more favourable.
Potentially,
yeah. Because a lot of the time you do see that they try to give some of the lower teams a easier start to get them in. They don't like the situation. This is how North Melbourne gets in there, like the 20 losses and something in a row. And as much as they've been a bit more competitive, because they end up getting a lot of these hard games middle of the year, because they do try to balance out and some of those easier games for those teams at the start of the year. Now, you never know which team's exactly going to be the easier team and that, but I feel like if North get the draw.
I wonder if we're not going to have such an easy draw, though, because we did play West Coast twice this year. I think we
you'll get West Coast twice again next year, mate.
Yeah. But
100% you'll get.
Maybe not as much. We'll see.
100%. I think you'll get West Coast, Hawthorn twice, and it'd be interesting to see sort of what other team they follow. But definitely, I think you're playing West Coast and Hawthorn twice.
Okay.
And cool. I would not be surprised if both of them, usually they try to get Hawthorn within that sort of first 6 weeks of that, because it's just the Tassie situation, and you'll probably play them down there, be it a home and away game. So it will depend. If it's something like, and it didn't seem to be really fast, but if it was like West Coast away, Hawthorn away in Tassie, but then you had like home games against, say, St Kilda and GWS, and we know you're playing the Bulldogs at home for good. Well, no, not the Bulldogs, the Carlton home Good Friday. It should be. So if there's 3 or 4 games there that look very favourable in the first 6 or 7, it will be hard to ignore. But a lot of this is, it's just kind of fixture.
You know what the real issue is, Swizz? Is that Harley Reid might come in and take all his points. Harley Reid and Sanders and all these other superstar drugs that we're going to get in the draft, they're going to come and steal all the LDU's points. He's going to be like, hey, Grundy. He's going to be Swizz. He's going to be like, hey, Grundy, why are you not capping down the ball to me? Like, come on, mate. Do better.
Harley Reid, round 1, mate, will be lining up in North Melbourne's forward line on the half forward line.
Maybe we'll see.
He will play half forward the first few weeks.
I reckon he might play half back, to be honest. This is what I'm hearing so far. He could end up lining.
That's a possibility too. But I think they play one. One's back, one's forward of Harley Reid. Forward.
And this is why I'm saying to everybody, I'm not going to go and stack the forward line like we've had in previous years. I'm going to come in and actually make the back line a lot stronger, because we might not get these backline players, but, mate, we're going to get a lot of very good forwards and a lot of very good mid-forward selections.
Abdul backs my last one on this list 100%, because I know he's been killed by him. But of the rucks, and as much as if Grundy is sole ruck or Gorn sole ruck, you've got to consider them, and even Marshall. But he's proven that he can play every game of the season. Tim English will be at the moment the number 1 lock for next season, unless something went horribly wrong in the preseason. He should be the number 1 ruck in most people's size for the next 5 to 10 years. The kid's a freak.
He killed me not owning him this year, as you say, with Abdul. The only thing with English might be his price point. Like, what are you expecting his price to be next year?
I don't care. It's going to be ridiculous.
If it's over
he's the number 1 person in the company. It'd be
but if it's over 700, if it's over, if he comes out and he's 750K and you're almost spending 10% of your salary on this one player, it's going to be a rough sell.
It'll be 7. I think it'll be right on 7.
At 700K, which means that you're probably spending, 700, you're probably spending $1.5 million on your rucks next year. I think I can take that, because that's what we've had to do before in the past.
Yeah, we've had to do. It's one of those guys. If there becomes enough debate between some of them, but he's a legitimate VC captain option.
Every week.
Yeah,
every week.
And there's potential there if the Doggies. Now, I think it's less likely than likely, but if the Dogs were to lose either Bailey Smith or Jack McRae, which I think Bailey Smith's more likely if it was going to happen next year because he's out of contract. Bit of rumblings. I've heard a bit about Jack McRae.
Isn't he in talks with the Dogs?
Who?
Bailey Smith. Sorry, isn't he Geelong? Bailey Smith?
Yeah. So the thing with him, because he works a couple of days a week for Cotton On, that's his massive, not sponsored, but I think you pretty well go in the western suburbs and you can see like he's everywhere, especially down Geelong. So they're based out of Geelong. So it makes a lot of sense there for him to move there, and then he can actually do a lot more of the off-field work with them. But also Geelong need him to play guts with their sort of their aging list, where he sort of. The hard thing with the Dogs is they've got guys like McRae who's done it for so long, Bailey Smith's there, but Libba and Treloar are just on form, need to be in that starting midfield. So it's hard for them to go.
What have you heard about Jack McRae?
It's not huge.
Is he coming to North Melbourne? This is what I'm.
No one's coming to North Melbourne, mate. No one's.
What?
No, there is a couple. I can talk about that in a sec, mate. But
Hey, Swizz, just checking before we kind of delve into this. You can share screen as part of your functions, right? Because obviously I can't pull up the team sheets when they.
I don't know if I can. I was just going to talk about the team sheets, but I actually don't know if I can. But that's a great question.
Just check. It should be the button down the bottom that you can just press share screen, and it should come up hopefully.
Yeah, if I had that button somewhere, I'm sure I'd probably do. It does not look like, mate.
Oh, all right. Well, we'll figure it out. You might just have to read it out.
I'll read it out. That's what I usually do anyway. That's fine.
Yep.
It's not out for another 10 minutes as it is. Yeah, well, so the big ones firstly is your boy, Benny Mackay. Has done
where's he going?
The big 180. If I had to rank them right now, which I did when a few people asked me today, Sydney 1, Essendon just over Port, and I think Port could overtake Essendon in the rankings of that, and then Hawthorn at 4, but I think Hawthorn could up it a little bit more. The problem with Essendon, and this is their whole issue for everything, and I'm on most clubs for supporters forums, and they've got this habit of not wanting to overpay in a trade sense or overpay in a money sense, and for them, they don't really want to overpay for Mackay in case Parrish does leave as a free agent. And because if Parrish leaves as a free agent, and if Mackay was only activated as a round 2, a second round pick for you, not pick 2, but a second round. And then if Parrish was to go, then they would potentially get a first round pick for him, which would then be diluted with that second round. And this week it's a bit complicated. So they'd probably get out of it Mackay and a second round pick. With all their herbs and spices and stuff like that. Yeah. The Essendon are very mindful that they don't want to lose Parrish for nothing, because if they were to overpay Mackay and then Parrish walks, they lose Parrish for nothing. Yeah. So they're obviously mindful.
North getting band 1. Like, there's no way now that we're not going to get banned.
And North will match any offer if it's not band 1. Now, Sydney will, and now part of this, I think, how Sydney do this, apart from the fact that they've Buddy Goes, who was on about 500,000. McCartan was on a huge amount, but there's McCartan. They've got Sam Reid, who was on a bit of coin, hangs up the boots. There's a few players that can be moved around there. Then what I believe could potentially happen is Dylan Stevens and Melican will go to North Melbourne. North Melbourne will overpay in a draft sense for them. So potentially what will happen is North Melbourne have Port Adelaide's first pick, which at the moment looks like about pick 16. So North would offer up pick 16 for Melican and Dylan Stevens, and maybe it's something late coming back or whatever. And the late pick doesn't really suit.
I think it has to be for the actual AFL to make trades.
So I think you've got to have something. So that's more
coming back. Yeah.
So I think it's like a future 4th or something like that comes back.
I'd rather give up a future 2nd than give up pick 16, to be honest.
Yeah, you would, but I think this is what they do. They pretty well go to Sydney. You make this work for us, and we'll make this work for you. So they offer, Mackay 800 for 5 or whatever whatever the trigger point. The club's got a rough idea what the trigger points is. So they do that. North Melbourne, what they want is pick 2. 1 and 2 sold, great, no problems. And then you're still bringing Melican, which sort of solves the problem of losing Mackay anyway. Like, it's not a straight swap, but it's still...
They're not the same player.
They're not, but it does help. Like, if you've got a fit Griffin Logue and an Aiden Core, Melican definitely fits in there as a, you've got something there, which I think works. And yeah, I get that, mate. He's, as I said, he's not a straight swap for Mackay, but there's potential there where if Logue becomes the number one guy, Melican kind of becomes that third. You need sort of Aiden Core, but then he's a bit. But there's something workable at least there. And Dylan Stevens, who I think that is where one hole for North is on that second wing. And I think given a lot more opportunity, and remember, I think he was number 5 pick, so the kid can play. He's got some talent. So he reminds me of kind of a bit like, I think, Jaden Stephenson, who I do rate. I just think him in a good team, and when North Melbourne start winning, he's going to be a lot more valuable. And I think Dylan Stevens
he's a support player. He's not a guy that can carry. And we know that by his ability to tackle and do some other things.
Yeah,
like
and I think that's nearly could be one side for North Melbourne, where you'd have Stephenson, Zerha, Dylan Stevens, potentially with these hot and cold players. But if you're up and about, that sort of wing half forward line will just rip teams apart. So I can see why they're definitely, it's worth doing that. And for the Swans, for them, that pick 16, which, I get what you say, but because of the 3 Gold Coast boys, because of Croft of the Bulldogs, that's going to, at the very least, be pick 20. It could even be pushed out a couple more spots. So it's not really pick 16. It's a different story if Port goes straight sets. But if it looks like being like it's going to end up being pick 20, pick 21 anyway, like, can you live with that? Absolutely, because it's about in the end getting 1 and 2.
Well, you say that, right? But it's still it's pick 16 of the available players. So you say, it's moved up, but you're not considering Jed Walter as being someone who's available.
No.
So regardless of the pick, it's not there.
But it's still like the 16th best player. The draft does sort of flatten out. Like, I think the gap, I think there's a clear, if you take out the boys who aren't available, the 3 Gold Coast boys, I think there's a clear sort of top 6, top 7 outside of them. And then pretty well marched. So you had the 3 Gold Coast boys, then you go say 10, and then you got Croft from the Bulldogs. So I think pretty well maybe the 11th, 12th player out to maybe 25. You can probably throw a blanket over. It might even go out to 30 there. So if there was, and North already have that other pick that they'll, I don't think it's that big of a deal if you missed out on that. If it meant Sydney looking after you to get Mackay to start, Mackay to a pick 2, bringing in some, say a little bit more mature age with Stevens, and Stevens not as much, but with Melican. And then for Sydney, it makes sense for them doing that, because that's the next thing I've been asked, because they are looking at Grundy. They are probably number 1 for Grundy, and that would satisfy Melbourne in a deal there where they could go, here's our pick 16, which will become 20, and we'll take Grundy, and they'll probably get something late back for that. So Sydney win, North Melbourne win.
We'll revisit this conversation, Swiss, but it looks like
teams are out, I believe.
Out.
All right.
Do you want to pull up some team sheets and we'll have a look?
I am. I'm just firing that up now. All right. What do we got here? Let's see.
I've already been so half decent traffic today, which is nice.
Oh, let's change it. All right. Usually they have that little the thing comes up on the latest, but let's go here. I want full teams. Click here for full teams. That's what we want. All right, round 24. Oof. This is amazing. All right, so Essendon Collingwood we'll start off with the Pies. Back is Bobby Hill and Jordan De Goey. I did say about you think the Pies might not risk everybody, but they were out. McCreary's out suspension. Jacob Ryan got injured, and Nathan Murphy is out injured there. So that's those 2 big in for the Pies, and there was, I don't think actually I was going to say if they had something interesting on their emergency list, or they don't. They've actually got Mason Cox playing. It's actually it's not a bad lineup still, Collingwood. Like, they're only really missing Darcy Moore and Dacos probably off there. There are probably a couple other players like that I've sort of missed there, but yeah, they're actually not too bad. Where you compare the Bombers out Kelly, Stringer, Caldwell, Guelphy, Peter Wright, and Draper. So if you're planning on picking the Bombers this week, don't. Pies are going to smoke them. In for the Pies is Baldwin, Brian, Wiedemann. Will Setterfield finally gets a game. He's been on the emergency list for the last sort of 3-4 weeks. And Will Snelling is in. Now, in regards to Tipper has hung up the boots for the second time. He is an emergency. So you would think Tipper's probably going to get named for sub as his last game. It's the one I'm disappointed in there is Patrick Vox is an emergency. So they haven't decided to play him. I wanted to have I think some Bomber supporters would have liked to have a look at him, but that's where they've gone there. For the Lions Saints game, Lincoln McCarthy is out injured. For the Saints, back Jack Haynes, and out Max King has been managed. Seb Ross is out injured, so that will really help the Lions with Max King not being there. Geelong versus the Doggies. We'll go the Dogs first because Geelong's going to take me half an hour. So for the Doggies, in Crozier, Toby McLean. There's a lost man for footy. He is back, and in comes Libba. Bailey Smith out. Interesting that Geelong don't get to have a close look up against him, but Bailey Smith out. Jack McRae out injured. Lockie McNeil and Taylor Duray. For the Cats, in Nevitt, Mullen, Dempsey, Stanley, Menegola, and I think making his debut was Toby Conway. Out Brad Close, Radigalia, Jeremy Cameron, Mitch Duncan, Tanner Bruin, Tom Hawkins, Zach Tui. So the Bulldogs.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a few guys I know with who was it? It wasn't Phillips. It was Tom Stewart, one of the Stewart boys.
No, so that's James Stewart. So James Stewart
yeah.
has another year to run.
I wonder if like Toby McLean and Menengola and a few of these other players might be getting the boot as well. So they're in for a bit of a, hey, come play your last game of the season and then see you later, mate. What do you reckon?
Quite possibly. Yeah, so Stewart actually even has a year to run on his contract.
Yeah, crazy.
And they've still gone, see you later. I've got actually a funny story about Stewart. So I was on my Bucks. We're up in Sydney. We're in Balmain, absolute NRL heartland. We walk into a pub and we ask somebody in there, could you get the AFL on for us? And the girl was like, oh, thank God, because nobody asked for the AFL and we need to wait for somebody to ask for it. And that was actually James Stewart's girlfriend. So
nice.
we were in there drinking with her and friends that night. So that was good fun.
That's cool.
Yeah, that was cool. So Geelong. So their forward line this week. I'm going to actually read out their forward line. So
not much,
they got Myers, Dempsey, and Isaac Smith. And full forward is Ollie Henry. They got Shannon Neal, who I think is only in his second or third game, and Tyson Stengel. It is if you took Isaac Smith out there, because he's got obviously 300 games experience, but that's as weak of a Geelong forward line as I've seen. And even their midfield, Menegola, Atkins, and Mark O'Connor. With Toby Conway, Dangerfield, and Holmes. So this is the new era of Geelong.
Geelong's in the finals, right? Or did Geelong just get out?
Geelong missed. Mate.
Okay,
Geelong are out.
Cool.
They're done. And I was saying this before, this is the first time the Cats have been able to put people in and have the actual proper first long preseason, because they'll all be back ready for that first game. For the Hawks, go on, mate.
Yeah, I don't know how much of an impact that will have, but sucks for Supercoach that Shannon Neal won't be a bargain basement rookie.
I'm annoyed about
rush forward
Conway as well.
Yeah,
the only potential thing is if they had they scored 10 or something like that and then got subbed out. That's the only potential out of that. But yeah, a bit frustrating. But it is what it is. Hawthorn, Freo, and the annoying thing, both these games. Oh no, it's actually they do as they always do. They put these games out of order. So this is the 145 game. So we've got Brandon Ryan and Jai Newcomb out. Granger Barras, he's one that could potentially be on the move. Ramson and Long have been dropped. And then for the Dockers, they brought back Hamling and Walters, out Banfield, Amira, and Erasmus. It's actually surprised Freo hasn't tried to blood a couple more people in there.
I thought Barras re-signed. Didn't he re-sign?
Has he re-signed? DGB?
I believe so.
I might have missed that.
I remember Daz posting something on Twitter about it, saying, those three-way trades with Barras doesn't matter anymore because he's re-signed. But maybe I'm mistaken.
Yeah. No, you could be 100% on that. I may have just missed that. It does seem like something I might have missed. I do try to keep up with Daz's stuff, but
fellow Fancast member, plug the channel.
The end of, it says here the end of 2024, and it might have not. It might have been just.
Okay, fair enough.
But he's still got one more year, but that might be one of those people who could potentially. They've got some options. They don't have. They might be trying to still continue to move on and change some players around. North Melbourne versus the Suns. So for the Kangas,
it's the tank game.
The tank is on, and it is tank. So the big tank. Blake Jury out, huge. Daniel Howe, who might have been worst on ground last week.
Is he out too?
Shocker. So he's out, dropped. Zeeble naturally out.
Yeah.
Poor Zeebs. That was shocking what happened to him. And Luke McDonald, and in is Lazaro, Dawson, and Miller Bergman. And for the Gold Coast Suns, we've got Davies and Burgess are in. Humphrey, Lukosius, and Rory Atkins omitted, which is interesting because a couple of people sent me their teams with Rory Atkins asking me, is it worth keeping him because he's playing playing North this week, or should I try to upgrade him? Well, that's made your decision very easy for those people who were asking me that.
How do people still have trades?
Yeah, I know, mate. What are they?
Mate, 1 week to go. Like, better use all of them, I'll tell you what.
Somebody sent me a message and showed me their team. They still had their boost. 3 trades and the boost.
I think DR said that too. I think DR said, I've finished my team, but I've got a boost left. Don't know how that works.
Might have been.
Yeah. Not sure how that works.
That's great. West Coast Crows. So we've got Hal, Shuey, and Hearn in, out. Campbell, Chesser, Jones, and True. And then for the Crows, Gallant and Parnell have come in. Out Thilthorpe, Rory Sloan, and Shane McAdam.
Sorry to interject. Have we done Gold Coast yet?
We have. So they only had 2. The couple outside, Humphrey, Lukosius, and Atkins.
I heard that Charlie Constable was going to be in, but I guess not.
I had heard it too, and not even on the emergency list.
Yeah,
I heard the same thing.
That didn't happen?
Did not happen at all.
Stinker. Oh, well, he'll be cheap next year, maybe.
No, because he still had the 2 high-scoring games this year, so he won't be. It's not a great price. All right, for the extended squad Sunday games, Port Adelaide, Teakle, Vizinenti, and Evans, or they're kind of tall players. Richmond out, Prestia, Rewalt, Cochin. In Ben Miller, Brewer, James Tazisis, who's brand new, Tom Brown, who's brand new, Sam Banks, and Mansell, extended squad, but there is potential to Richmond to play those games. And I talked about this earlier. This has got the 2016 Richmond Sydney game all over again, where we debuted a few guys. So would not surprise me if a couple of them get the final nod. Sydney, Melbourne, Amadi, Melican, and Roberts back in, extended squad. And then for the Ds, Shaki out, but Fritsch, Turner, Woden, and McDonald ins. And lucky last, the Blue Baggers are playing the Giants. Giants, Flynn, Haynes, and Angwin, but I don't think that's going to affect Briggs because he's still, in. So Flynn's the last spot on the emergency, so I'm not worried about that. In for the Blue Baggers, Chera, Durden, Fogarty, Mitch McGovern, and Walsh out, Kurnow, and Doherty. Would not surprise me if Carlton, Giants, depending on the results, what happened sort of on Saturday night, if there's more changes coming on the Sunday.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. They might rest a few players. They might try and get some guys.
If Geelong if Geelong was somehow to beat the Bulldogs, which with that lineup seems impossible, but then it seemed impossible. West Coast would beat the Dogs last week. If that was the case, than the Giants. You know, they've got no worries about resting players for their last game. And we've lost the Jazz man there again as he's driving and checking out all the streets of Melbourne. Thanks for that, Corey. Global not picking English over 700. I guess that's something to do with it all depends on Grunt. Like Grundy's going to be cheap. Gorn, Marshall, they're all options. That's it. Corey, normally play Gold Coast twice. Yeah, that's potentially. But it'd be interesting to see who they try to pair up with Gold Coast next year because now dimmer. So you expect Richmond to get them twice. You can lock that in. They always do stuff like that. Wanganeen Malira is the same price as Gordon at the start of the year. Right now, if the end of the year finished now at 470 odd. Yeah, but it's not based on where people finish on their price. It's based on their average from the previous year. So usually if you average about 100, by this time of the year, 500, averaging 100 players are 500K, but they start the year at about 550. And then players so English about 130 should start 700, just a little bit over. It's all based there on your output for the season. And then you've got, players who only play 10 games, 9 games. I don't know what the AFLW has done. So their base player, I think, is about your average is 75 points, where AFL's Supercoach it's 100. But if you've missed half the season last year, so I think that's based around 5 games, so you get a 10% discount. And then every game you miss after that, it's an extra 2%. So if you play no, you get 20% discount. I actually don't mind them doing that. That's something a little bit different. Which Jez has completely muted himself. So that would probably be easy to follow than just some of these random. This play gets a 10% and this play gets a 30%, and that I kind of like the system that they've gone with that. Always interesting discussions. I think Supercoach does need a few changes and stuff. So I'd like them to be a little bit more transparent. I know everybody wants them to be a bit more transparent or someone that's scoring. Which players get the Bont tax. And then last week frustrated me because Tim English had more Supercoach than what Bont had. But Tim Dream Team than Supercoach. But I get it, the efficiency and the turnovers and everything like that. But sometimes it's frustrating when one particular player ends up going minus 20 Dream Team to Supercoach and the other one gets plus 30 and they're so far apart. So, it is, we all want a little bit more transparency around that. But for most of the time, Supercoach scoring is not too bad. So will be interesting to kind of see how this round sort of goes now. And those VC cards, I think some people are going to want to lock in the Friday night game and be looking at sort of your merit. But for me, it's really hard to go against the Saturday night games. Now, Laird against West Coast or Dawson, one of those two does sound like a really good pick. But I really like the idea that one of the Bulldogs players, they have to win. So English now up against Conway or Bont up against that midfield. It's got to be one or the other. Now, the problem is, so I've got English last week and Bont was the one. I've got a feeling it'll be English this week. That's probably the one, but everybody's going to jump on Bont, and we always seem to match those two. So one of them should go off. So it's really hard to ignore that game. Sicily against Freo should be pretty good, but I just think you've got to have one of these dogs this week as your vice captain, and then you're trying to find that captain on the Sunday. I've got I think I've got Butters at the moment against Richmond. That Richmond team's going to be a bit more weakened. Port potentially need to try to win by a large margin. It's probably going to be impossible, but at the same time, it just seems to be the place I kind of want to go. I think it's just kind of makes the more common sense. I don't know what everybody else out there is thinking, but that's just kind of where I'm going. Outside of that, anybody else? So I'll sit there and say, what are you thinking about with your trades? But there's not much going on.
Yeah.
Oh, you're back, Jez. I was just saying about VC and captains. I think it's either flip the coin. It's either Bont or English this week as your VC.
I don't have English, so Bont makes it easy for me. Yeah.
The difference between, I was just saying, between him and the Adelaide boys playing West Coast is Bulldogs have to win, where the Crows, they still want to win for pride, but it's not where the
for
Bulldogs
me, it's not even that. For me, like, I understand what you're saying, right? But for me, it's not even that. It's more just I've been struggling to find which of the Adelaide boys is actually going to score well. It's hard to predict, hey, Dawson's going to have a good week or Laird's going to have a good week or even like Keys is going to have a good week versus, hey, there's no Libba or there is Libba, but like Bont is just so safe.
Yeah. I do like Sicily. I was talking about that before. Sicily against Fremantle. I think he could just have a field day at the G, but I don't want to be missing out on one of these dogs. Like English is up against Conway. Like what's he gonna do? What's he gonna do against Conway? Where Bont's up against probably the worst Geelong midfield I can remember in history. So it's one or the other, and
you got to pick the Bont.
I was just saying the problem is I went English last week and destroyed. So this is what usually happens. Then I go Bont this week, and English is the one that's going to go massive.
Well, keep going English then Bont will go good for me.
Yeah. Well, I feel like potentially this is the week like English goes like 180. He just destroys rookie ruckman.
Yeah, I think so.
So maybe I'll just do that as a bit of a point of difference. Yeah, well,
maybe
that was handy. If he just starts taking kickouts again, does it all.
Yeah, done.
No, that's.
I didn't ask you. We were talking about before about kind of what you want to do with Supercoach and who you want to pick, but I didn't really get your opinion, Swizz, on next year. Kind of, do you have an idea for a format? Are you going to kind of go like me and go mass guns and rookies, or do you think, kind of looking at a predictor now compared to next year, kind of knowing where a lot of the prices will sit, do you think you'll go a bit more mid-price heavy?
I kind of balanced it a little bit this year, and I did have quite a few mid prices that kind of start, and then it kind of just sort of balance out like a little bit of value. It's just more, as you said, in regards to like this year, we pretty well stacked the forward lines.
Yes, like
it does
4,
depend
5,
on people.
6 players in there.
Yeah, it does depend on sort of which players potentially could pick up that sort of status. But there's not too many. Like I was just sort of having a quick look through the players list of forwards at the moment, because you're sort of looking at those players who have picked up the forward status this year, because they've had the bigger percentage. So we know Walsh has missed out. Petrarca has spent a bit more time second half of the year up forward, but he's not going to get enough percentage to do it. So I look at the highest. We'll go by highest averaging players. Josh Dunkley's losing it. Butters is losing it. Rosie most likely loses it. Taranto loses it. Goulden loses it. So there's your top 5. All lose forward status.
And a lot of those guys outside of Taranto, like I'm going to actually consider in my starting midfield next year.
Yeah. I am. It's hard to kind of ignore, but particularly somebody like a Butters. Who will probably be Port's number 1 midfielder. If he's not already, he's Port's number 1 midfielder. So, that's it. Jack McRae could potentially get it. I could see him starting with forward status. So that wouldn't surprise me. Canelio probably loses it as well because he's played a lot in the guts. So that's your top 6. Jack McRae's your 7th. And you look at the top 6, only 6 players have averaged over 100 this year in the forward line. And we're probably losing all 6 of them. Then you got McRae at 99, who could potentially have, but then he has forward status for a reason. He hasn't been playing guts, which has absolutely destroyed him because that's where he plays. That's where he racks up his pill. Number 8 is Sheasel, so he's losing forward status. That's gone.
I wonder what his DPPs are going to be next year. Like
I feel like he's just
defender or just defender or
just defender. He starts pure defense.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll still pick him.
I still pick him anyway, but he's staying pure defense, and he's going to be probably 545.
Oh, how can you not?
So then you've got Charlie Curnow will be next on the list. Is that a ripping year? I actually know a couple of people who have had him in second half of the year and got absolutely rewarded brilliantly. They've had him some weeks as VC. And he's one of those brilliant VCs, because if he's on and he's just going off the charts,
Yeah.
then you got
those like 6-goal games, you're in trouble.
Yep. So who else are you going to fall on? You got Shea Bolton, who'll still have forward status. Then you get down to your two rucks, which is Luke Jackson and Darcy Cameron, and they're probably the most interesting ones. Darcy Cameron's probably going to lose it because he hasn't spent enough time forward. Luke Jackson could keep it, just because of the amount of time he had to play forward when Sean Darcy was in. So he might be. It might be sort of the case. You look at that list and go, "There's not a lot of like." Even if you scroll down even like a bit further, Caleb Daniel probably loses his. Like you got your Toby Greens, your Dylan Moores, your Dusties, those sort of people. Zeebel's done. Nick Martin loses his because he's been playing more wing. He potentially he's played a few games recently on the half forward, but I think he still loses his. Taron Thomas has been spending more time around the guts, so he'll be line ball to keep it. And now you've got guys who are averaging in the 80s after that. Yeah, Heaney's and even Flanders probably loses his because of the amount of time he's played around the midfield. So there's not of the ones this year look like will keep their forward status. Then you kind of go to these midfielders, and the ones so that like the top end aren't having forward status, like they're the highest scoring players because they play pure mid. So you've got to kind of then start scrolling down to your guys around that 100 mark. Sam Walsh, as we said, he hasn't played enough time to get it. He's close, but he's not. So then you go to the guys in the 90s, even the Goeys and McCluggages. Those guys have been playing pure midfield. You got your Blake Acres plays wing, so it's not going to be them. Even Zorko, he's not getting full status. So now we're getting to the guys sort of in the 80s range, before you've got to kind of find players that might have like your Ben Keys types and stuff like that, who are going to have start as your forward status. But yeah, these guys who potentially could if they got pure midfield. So I think you're right there. There's not a lot standing out where I go, that guy's going to get your forward status. You kind of then starting to take a punt. It might be, for example, your F1.
Going to be value. It's going to be value.
Could be, it could be like a Luke Jackson as your F1 because that's covering your ruck. And then you might have one or two of these other guys. It may still be like a Horn Francis if you think he can take the next step, or maybe if it's a Jai Caldwell if Essendon were to restructure with Parrish out. So you're kind of in that frame of mind, and then it's just sort of cheap guys, and you just hope there's enough cheap forwards that are coming back. So it's a bit annoying this week because Jack Haynes is coming back. So good for him naturally, but it's from a super coach point of view, you're like, oh well, we could have got that guy on a super discount because he's 328 but hasn't played a game, so he could have definitely been one that you're going, okay, we might have had to pick this guy up in the 200s, and he becomes your kind of F1. Petrarca Ryan, no, he won't. He was close, but I think he's that sort of guy again who. Yeah, they need 35%, and he's probably sitting at 30. What hurt him was Clary going out. If Clary played the entire time, Petrarca was a real borderline chance.
Even Max Gawn with Grundy still in the team.
The one that could potentially there is Grundy. So he at Port Adelaide, like he's just that he'd be the biggest lock at F1 if he moves clubs and they gave him forward status, and you'd think he'd have to be a good chance.
Yeah. Well, even at Sydney, even like I think Grundy anywhere.
Yeah, anywhere bar Melbourne.
Yeah, anywhere bar Melbourne, whatever team he goes to, he's going to be the number one ruck. He's going to play everywhere. He's probably going to score 100+. And he'll be under 500 play.
And even a couple of the other guys I was potentially looking at, Tyler Sonzi, who's going to miss the start of next year anyway because of that suspension, who will probably have forward status. but could potentially be playing in Richmond's midfield. Well, he won't be because he won't be there for round one now. So that's just so that's frustrating. So he just becomes like scratch him off the list. Yeah, and there's not too many of the other guys because now you're starting to get into guys who have played sort of your 6-7 games, like Membry. I don't think he's going to get enough of a discount for us to really consider. But these are guys that we might have to consider because we're going, okay, he might be 262. It's the whole when we had this early the year, Oscar Allen, who actually was a good pick. Some people were looking at the King boys, these sort of guys who we knew were going to be playing most weeks, but they were in that kind of weird price. Charlie Comden, but key forward. I don't know if he's getting enough potential there in the point. So yeah, the forward line I think is going to be thin, and we just hope there's enough guys that are coming through in this draft that get early opportunities who actually have forward status. But I don't mind it as well. I like the idea that it could be really open, and there's potential that teams look so much different. I hear you, Corey.
Yeah, I think so.
Over Newman. Yeah, safe from wrong. Yeah, so that's the
I think the option to like you're saying, making teams so unique is what Supercoach has been good about. I think eventually, kind of the week before, people will work out and say, "Oh, well, there's not really options, so we're going to have to pick this or pick something else." But I think, kind of for us now, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I think, and I've said this in past years, it has to be one or two ways on a year. Like this year, nearly everyone started the same forward line because there was 4 or 5 guys that you just had to pick. Maybe there was a couple of differences. Like I started Cunnington and had him out pretty after 3 weeks, but there might have been a couple of players. I think everyone's sort of F4 was the one up for grabs, but I think most people had Taranto, Dunkley, and one of the Port boys to kind of start off with. Well, Rosie was the popular choice, and then you probably had Gordon. So I think I might have had Cunnington at like F5 there. But we were all pretty hard like on those at least 3 or 4 guys. So I think it either has to be really thin on the line. So say the forward line, and you just have literally nobody to pick. So in even a perfect world, maybe it's even no Jackson, no Grundy, and your best forward option becomes Charlie Curnow. And people are like, oh, wow, there's nothing in the forward line here. So who are, hey, mate, there you are. So, there's absolutely nothing in the forward line. And, Charlie Curnow is your number one person. And people are like, oh, God, if that's maybe I'll go thin, where other people might go, well, that's all we have. And then it's either the defense absolutely flood the defense. Yeah. And you've got all the main your Sicilies and your Ryans and all these good, but then you've still got your Dacoses and your Sheezels and even you maybe your Pendles and whoever. There's just so many options where that's how you get a variety of that because there's so many good players that you can pick. Your Newmans, your Dohertys, you name it. So I would like Supercoach to kind of and it's relying on champion data. But in a perfect world, if they can flood at 1 or 2 positions and then have the forward line as scarce as anything, it does make the competition a bit more interesting.
I think next year is going to be the time when it really is truly like teams that can be very, very different because we're missing out. I don't see, as you say, when you've gone through that list of available forward line players. Like we've had Dunkley for a few years as a forward. We've had your Rosie and Butters as kind of a mid forward and your staple players almost. All of these players now are going to be, they're all going to be midfielders. So what's going to be the difference? Are you going to pick the traditional midfielders, your Bont, your Neil, Merritt and all these, or are you going to kind of go for the newer players, the ones that you've always picked but now have to compete with everyone else? Like there's going to be a lot of very different teams going into that round one.
Yeah, and I even like the fact that with the defense, for example, it gets a bit flooded because there's actually some value down there as well. Yeah. Like you're going to have someone like Josh Gipkus who's going to come straight back into that Richmond lineup. And he's going to be probably around the 200K mark. He could be even in the high 100s, like kind of situation where he's a guy that's going to come in, take some intercept marks, potentially average sort of 60-ish for us. Where you're like, oh, well, he might be too much value to pass up just for the fact that he's going to make cash. Zach Williams, if he was ever getting himself fit, but because of the amount of footy he's missed, there is potential for him to get in there. If Tom Highmore gets back into that St Kilda lineup and gets over his issue, goes to a different club or something like that. But there is some players there who have played footy, got experience, and if they get their roll back and they get over their injuries, that sort of, and we had it like we talked about this year with the forward line. That's sort of what we had with people, Oscar Allens and the Kings and McLeans and stuff like that, where that was highly debated and turned out to be the right decision not to go with most of them except for maybe Oscar Allen. But yeah, I think if you've got a lot of defensive premium options, but you've still got value there, it does make different strategies available for everyone.
The problem with mid prices though is that you look at mid price and it's like, as you say, he's going to score a 60. Well, if I've got Dan Curtin playing for West Coast round 1, he's scoring a 60. So why would I spend the extra 100 odd K getting that mid pricer, right?
Yeah. The problem is that if Curtin goes pick 2, he's going to be $200,000 anyway.
Well, that's true, but at least we know he's going to be best 22 playing every week. I think the problem, what I'm looking at doing next year is to, see if I can pick the top 6 kind of players and then go in and then have 2 guys on the bench just making money, because we rarely ever, unless there's like your Buckley types or your Stocker, Liam Jones was supposed to be that player for us this year. If they're not that type of player, then you're really going to struggle. Like, I'd rather not have a 30 or a 40 on the bench. I'd rather have Sicily scoring 170 versus a midfielder or a forward potentially at the same price, not scoring as much.
Yeah, no, 100%.
All righty, we might take a couple more questions, guys, and then we might head off because it's getting close to 7 o'clock. Just saying thanks as well for Swizz for jumping on. Obviously, a bit of spur of the moment, but it's been really good kind of having the guests on. We had a few last week on Monday. We had Swizz on today, covering for Joe for not being here and keeping that kind of community spirit going. So it's been really good.
Poor form, Joe.
I think I'm with Corey this week. Corey, I also have 21. I have 3 bench plays, and they're all playing. This week, Marek's playing, Keys is playing, and Wagner's playing. I'm still down 1 player because Jack Siebel's out, McRae's out, Dacos is out, and then Doherty's out. So 21 this week. Not happy.
Having a look at the Southeast Juniors footy presentation night, I'm going to embarrass one of my young cricketers here in Siena, who won the best and fairest for the league. So there's one for potentially for AFLW in 3 years. And another one of the girls I coach, I think her video, I'm actually just watching her speech now. It's an hour in. And Jade is another one who's, I think she might be involved in a couple of NGAs. It'd be, I wish them all the best. Very excited to know that there's a couple of people that I've coached in cricket who are making their way through the footy system, and hopefully they get themselves on the list within the next couple of years. It'd be cool to hopefully have AFL Super Coach by then, and I can pick them in my team.
100%. I have a question before you head off. Do you want to help me do some footy tipping for this week?
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. All right, we can do that while we're on the stream, and then we can head off after that. Because I haven't actually done my footy tips, so that's fine. Good old footy tips. Last week I only had 9, which I'm not happy about, but it is what it is. Who do we have for Essendon Collingwood, Swizz?
Oh, mate, Collingwood, absolute lock.
Guys, easy.
Yeah, this round's actually not too bad. Yeah,
I have to pick Gold Coast. North's only $3.65, so it's
I don't know. I can't believe that's not like. I can't actually believe this whole round is as close in the betting as it is.
Yes,
because some of these games are so one-sided, and I'm not a huge gambler. Like I saw Global before getting. Hopefully, I haven't got you too addicted to the old Draft Stars, but Draft Stars I love. But I don't bet a huge amount on sports bet. Or it's gambling responsibly, but I have locked in a multi this week because some of these odds are ridiculous. So Gold Coast, an absolute lock. I was like, I'll take the money on that. I was just like, and I looked at that Collingwood Pies lineup and was like, I'll take the Pies. Hawthorn Freo I've left out because I think I'm very confused how that game goes. I've tipped Hawthorn.
I'm going to pick Hawks. I reckon they come
I've
out.
tipped Hawthorn.
I don't think ladder-wise, I don't think the ladder affects them too much. But I think Hawthorn finishes off with a bang and basically says to any prospective guys that want to come to the club, hey, look what we can do, you know.
Yeah, and I think Freo may have checked out, but I'm not. Yeah, I'm confused a little bit with that game in particular. Brisbane St Kilda are just Brisbane. They don't lose at home.
No,
simple as that.
Geelong Bulldogs.
Yeah, and what are Geelong paying on that? What do they got Geelong at?
$2.40.
So what's that? Bulldogs $1.60 or something?
Yeah.
The Bulldogs are how are the Bulldogs not $1.20 here? Like, and we know what happened last week. Yes, but surely
it
doesn't matter. Geelong, and I know the Bulldogs never win down there, but there's no way Geelong are beating the Dogs this week. Like, if West Coast if Bulldogs have any sort of pride left in them, they get this job done and they get it done easy. So on that, you probably pick Geelong. Beveridge, I said earlier, I started the show with that. If the Dogs lose this week, Beveridge, you're not there next week. Just go find another job.
Yeah. Well, Bevo might get sacked as much as the club keeps trying to say them.
The problem, you know what I can see happening, is Carlton potentially beating the Giants. Dogs make finals and win their first final. They're like, well, we can't sack Beveridge now. He's just won a final.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's kind of the hard part because people say he's been useless, and I think he has a little bit, but yeah.
Like, am I confident that Carlton, let's say it's Carlton Bulldogs first week of finals, that Carlton are getting the job there against the Dogs? No. Like, Bulldogs have got so much talent and they've been there before, and Carlton haven't. It's, like, I can see the Dogs winning that first final.
Yeah.
Crows, I've locked them in my mind. Even them, they were like $1.20 something.
Yeah, $1.20.
I was like, thank you for that. I'll throw that in as well.
We'll make that happen.
They're not listening to West Coast. West Coast had their moment last week. And then in the biggest this is the biggest lock of the weekend. And even with all those games, Port Adelaide will smoke Richmond.
Yeah.
Like, Richmond got up last week for their, the big retirement games. It was a huge event. That Dusty was never letting North beat Richmond last week. He was playing like it was 2017 all over again. He was trying to get Cochin goals, Jack goals, doing everything. So the natural come down from that game. You've lost those leaders. It means nothing. Port Adelaide, I said at the start of the show, I think they've got to make up 200 points-ish on Brisbane and Collingwood if they would have if the Pies were to drop the game against Essendon. But and at the same time, Port still need to make sure they win to stay above Melbourne if they want to, depending on who they want to play first week of finals. So, Port are just going to smoke Richmond.
Oh, yeah. Port are going to punish North Melbourne for having their first round pick. And going back to what you were saying before about Dylan Stevens and then Mellick and going over for their Port's pick, I'm not a fan of it. Like, I reckon there'll still be some players you can pick at that price. There'll be some role players to pick there, but Port Adelaide are going to make it very, very tough for us. For Ken Hinkley to come out and kind of do what he's done, for him to be a bit like, hey, the start of the year, people wanted to sack him. Now he's playing finals. Like, massive turnaround. Congratulations. But, Sydney for me versus Melbourne.
I picked the day. I've left this out of the multi, but I've actually picked Melbourne.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. That is the big 50-50 game of the weekend. Would not be surprised if it goes either way.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, it's kind of, I think Sydney at home. Is it Buddy's last game or he's fully retired?
He's not playing. Right? He's retired. He's done.
Yeah. So
his last game will be next year when the Gold Coast signed him as an assistant coach, but they actually put him on the list so they keep him out of the soft cap.
Yeah, that will happen. Maybe that's how they'll offload kind of some of their picks for other players too. But I think Sydney playing their last game for the season. Because they're making finals, aren't they?
They're playing finals, mate. They're playing finals.
For some reason,
I'll tell you, this game is as open as anything. I don't know which way it goes at all, but I'm going the D's. I just think they're a better team. Yeah. But no issues with picking Sydney there.
Yeah.
To Jonas quickly, I've got Butters. Butters is absolutely going to tear. Butters or Rosie are going to tear Richmond a new one. That's the backup. No problem. So both are going over 100. Even if they get 110, like you take it as a captain at the moment, but they're smashing them. And the last game,
I think
at the moment, the last game I've picked Carlton at the moment. However, the Giants need to win, and Carlton are playing. And if Carlton aren't playing for anything, the Giants probably win that. That's one where potentially I log back into my tips on the Sunday and flip it over depending on who needs to win.
Yeah, no, definitely. All right, guys. Well, that's us for today. Thank you very, very much for jumping on, Swizz. Hopefully, we'll see you tomorrow on Fan Cam, so that should be a lot of fun.
You are, yeah. A Fancast, mate. Fancast Australia.
Fan
Yeah.
Cam.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if in the background you've been noticing me open a package, but I've got a bit of a package, and hopefully you guys on the stream can get a bit excited as much as I can. Big J got some new lighting for his setup, so let me go and plug these suckers in, and then we'll have some fun.
Yeah, mate. Wait until what I've got to install in a couple of weeks' time, and that with the new studio coming.
I won't look as gloomy as what I'm looking because, like how it goes, the lighting in my room's not great. All right, guys, we'll see you on Sunday. Have a great last week. Stay tuned for some more stuff. Swizz, you doing AFL Fantasy this year?
AFLW Fantasy? Yeah, mate. If there's a fantasy competition out there, mate, you could be playing marbles or something, and I find out there's a fantasy competition. I'm probably in it. Yeah, I'm all over it, mate. Like,
lock it in.
I love it, mate. Love it.
All right, we'll catch you guys. See you later.
Bye.